Spanish has many verbs, some of which are normal across all pronouns, and some of which are not so normal, called irregular yo verbs. While you may encounter regular verbs like comer, the syntax of comer across all pronouns follows the standard conjugation pattern of verbs ending in er, such as o, es, e, and so on. However, sometimes in Spanish, you'll encounter verbs that follow this pattern across all pronouns, except in the yo pronoun. And while these verbs follow the normal syntax of every other pronoun, they do not follow the pattern for the yo pronoun because Spanish says that these conjugations don't sound good enough when the word is said. There are useful verbs like salir, which means to leave, and while the verb follows the normal syntax of verbs ending in ir, it doesn't do so with the yo pronoun. You would want to say yo salgo, but Spanish says that this word sounds bad, so instead, you would say yo salgo, ending the pronoun with go, which is actually a common ending for irregular verbs in the yo pronoun, some of which I covered in my previous videos, like hacer and tener. Hacer follows the normal pattern across all pronouns, but changes to hago in the yo pronoun so that it sounds better when said. Tener does the same thing with yo tengo, but it's also a stem-changing verb across some pronouns, but the topic of stem-changing verbs is for the video after this one. You might also encounter irregular verbs in the yo pronoun like conducir and traducir. In both cases, the verbs follow the normal pattern of conjugating verbs ending in ir, but for the yo pronoun, you would want to say yo conduco or yo traduco, but Spanish says that these words sound bad when said, so it adds an extra letter to avoid the bad sound. And so the conjugations would end in sco, pronounce yo conduzco and yo traduzco, which would mean I drive and I translate. You might also encounter this verb, dar, which means to give, and while it follows the normal pattern of conjugating verbs ending in ar, the conjugation for the yo pronoun is not yo do, but yo doy, which is sort of similar to yo soy with the verb ser and yo estoy with the verb estar. At last, there's also the verb ver, which means to see, and while its conjugations perfectly correspond to all pronouns, the yo pronoun is not yo vo, but rather yo veo, which means I see. When using verbs like salir, hacer, tener, conducir, traducir, dar, and ver, you have to remember that these verbs follow the normal syntax across all of their pronouns, except in the yo pronoun, which therefore makes the verbs irregular yo verbs. And actually, these verbs would be practical to use whenever you decide to speak Spanish, but just remember to utilize the yo pronoun properly with them. There are more types of irregular yo verbs like poner, suponer, proteger, and traer, and while these verbs follow different patterns for the yo pronoun, I recommend knowing these verbs rather than using them because generally speaking, they're not that useful in conversation. For instance, poner and suponer follow the common go ending in the yo pronoun while maintaining the normal syntax across the rest of the pronouns. Proteger is an interesting verb because it's actually the only verb in Spanish that follows an irregular ho ending for the yo pronoun while still maintaining the normal conjugation pattern. At last, you can have a verb like traer, which follows the normal pattern of verbs ending in er, but in the yo pronoun, it has the ending traigo. And actually, this ending is done on purpose, not to confuse it with trago, which in Spanish comes from the word tragar, which means to swallow, suck down, or eat crap. And actually, it's one of the most offensive verbs that there is, so it's best to not mention it. Overall, you just have to know that with verbs like these, you have to slightly modify the yo pronoun across all verbs so that the word sounds uniform when said, and at that point, you can basically say any sentence you want using these verbs. This has been irregular yo verbs in Spanish. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I made your learning just a bit simpler.